So welcome to this AIPH 2023 Novelty Protection webinar. I'm Audrey Tim, I'm Technical Advisor to AIPH. AIPH is the world's champion for the power of plants. We represent the global ornamental horticulture industry. Through our Novelty Protection group, we advocate a good working and strong plant breeders' rights system. Just a few notes about this webinar. All of the participants are on mute and your cameras are off. Please stay this way. There is a Q&A session. So following presentations from both speakers, there'll be a Q&A session. Please put your questions into the Q&A function and we will bring them to the speakers. The webinar is being recorded and it will be available for viewing on demand on the AIPH website and on our AIPH YouTube channel. Let's get started. Thank you for joining. To start with, please could I introduce you to Jack Goossens, who will be leading this session. Jack's a valued supporter of AIPH. Together with his brother Charles, Jack runs a Laurus Nobilis nursery in the Netherlands. Jack's responsible for the commercial and financial side of the company. Sustainability plays an important role in the nursery. The projects they initiated resulted in the founding of 2 new companies in 2021, Valstar and Double Destiny Flora. These startups focus on the high-value valorization of horticultural waste. To date, they have developed and launched tea, paper, licorice, and a line of personal care products to the market, all based on ingredients derived from organic material that it would otherwise have been converted into compost. Jack joined the supervisory board of Royal Flora Holland, of which he is chair since 2016. In 2021, Jack became a member of AIPH's board and chairs the Ornamental Production Committee. Very pleased to have you as part of the AIPH team, Jack. May I hand over to you now and to introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you very much. On behalf of AIPH, I would like to welcome everybody to this webinar on novelty protection. AIPH's key aim is to stimulate the demand for ornamental trees, plants and flowers worldwide. We are committed to supporting growers in achieving this by protecting and promoting the interests of the industry. The Ornamental Production Committee does this by focusing on plant health protection, novelty protection and sustainability. Today's topic is novelty protection and we are honored to welcome Mr. Marien Valstar and Dr. Edgar Krieger as our speakers. Mr. Valstar will update us on the developments and challenges within UPOF, and Dr. Krieger will make a case for the importance of the obliged use of variety denomination in the industry. As Audrey explained, after the second presentation, you will be invited to join in the panel discussion with Mr. Valstar and Dr. Krieger. During the presentations, you can put your questions in the Q&A. I would like to start by introducing our first speaker. Mr. Marien Valstar is the Senior Policy Officer for Seeds and Propagating Materials in the Directorate General for Agro and Nature in the Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality in the Netherlands. His work focuses on national, European and global policies related to plant variety protection and registration and certification of plant varieties. Current responsibilities in the Netherlands are seed law, plant breeders law, plant variety board, and variety testing representative of the Netherlands in European Council working parties and standing committees on seeds of the European Commission. From 2019 to 2022, he was president of the Council of the International Union for the Protection of New Varieties of Plants, UPOF, and he is the current president of the Administrative Council of the European Community Plant Variety Office. Mr. Valstar will speak on the development and challenges within UPOF. Farmers and growers all over the world need good varieties, And the UPOV system is designed to promote the development of new plant varieties. Modern challenges that are important for the plant breeding are climate change and the need to adapt agriculture and horticulture, the ongoing discussion on loss of biodiversity and ecosystems, and the upcoming use of new genetic techniques. To get a better insight and understanding of the importance of the UPOV system, Mr. Valstar will give a general impression on how UPOV could contribute to these challenges. Mr. Valstar, the floor is yours.
What is so important to keep reminding ourselves of that farmers or growers, they need breeders, and breeders need farmers and growers. There sometimes are these discussions like, well, I don't like the amount of the value or what I have to pay for the planting materials and for the new varieties. But I think farmers, growers, and breeders are in the same boat. They should work together. They have many common interests. So that's how I would like to see the world, growers and breeders working together. And in the end, they are not working for themselves. No, they are working for consumers. So consumers need both farmers and they need breeders. So I will talk a little bit about overall perspectives. What has plant breeding to offer? Why do we have plant breeding, and what are the benefits for society? I'll talk a little bit about the growers' perspectives, your perspectives, and about breeders' perspectives. Next slide, please. And it's good to remember, let's say my basic presentation comes from agriculture in general. And of course, ornamentals growing, horticultural growing is a specific part of agriculture, but in most cases, let's say the trends and the similarities are, especially when it's about plant variety protection and about plant breeding, are quite similar. So I'll start with mainly an agricultural talk, but you can draw the same conclusions for ornamentals growing, I guess. So one of the things to highlight the importance and the power of agriculture, modern agriculture, and the power of plant breeding is this slide. There you can see, this is an OECD study, that the last 50 years, the world population went multiplied by 2.6, but food production multiplied by 3.9. So we have been able to produce more food for the people, for the whole world population. Next slide, please. And historically, you can see that on the left side of this graph, historically, more production meant more land in use. But also since the 1960s of last century, there has been a decoupling. That means we did not need to use more land, almost not, only 10% extra since the 60s, but the food production went almost 4 times higher. So there's a strong decoupling, which is, when you talk about biodiversity, when you talk about world food security, very important to notice. Next slide, please. And this is, let's say, where the explanation of this comes from. When you look in the past, the 60s of last century, you could see that most of the growth of the agricultural output came from using additional inputs like water, fertilizer, and also still additional land. And when you look to the right of the whole graph, you see that gradually in the modern times, the green part, the efficiency gains became more and more important. And efficiency, that is partly, let's say, smarter agricultural practices, but also a big part of those efficiency gains are found in plant breeding, in improving the productivity of plants themselves. Next slide, please. So, well, 1960 is more or less a coincidental year, but it's also around the time that the UPOV Convention was established. And the UPOV Convention is a convention that that tries to provide and promote an effective system of plant variety protection with the aim of encouraging the development of new varieties of plants for the benefit of society. So that is the mission of UPOV, to make sure that there is an incentive for plant breeders to put new varieties to the market. Next slide, please. How does UPOV work? Countries can become a member of UPOV, and states or even also regions like the EU, European Union as a union, is also a member of UPOV. And such a country or organization must have a law which conforms to the UPOV Convention, so which follows all the rules and regulations that UPOV has. Then such a country can ask advice to the Council of UPOV whether the Council agrees that their law is in conformity to the convention, and if they get a positive advice, they can officially ask to become member of UPOV. And as soon as you are a member of UPOV, that means that plant breeders worldwide know and understand that they can bring their varieties in that country to the market and have protection for their new varieties. Next slide, please. So why is this important? Next slide, please. I think I already showed you a little bit when we talked about efficiency gains and productivity gains in agriculture, but it's not only productivity and efficiency. It's also about more choice for growers. Here's an example of Latin American countries. Before acceding to UPOV, well, growers would have the choice of around 200 varieties to grow, and after joining UPOV, it's more than doubled the amount of varieties they can choose from. So more choice for growers, I think that's a good thing. Next slide, please. Also increased productivity. I already mentioned that. Recently there was a study in Vietnam which compared the productivity before having a plant variety protection law and after, so before joining UPOV and after. And there was a very clear line to be found that after joining UPOV, the annual, so year in year productivity increase due to plant breeding was for important crops like rice and corn close to 2% year in, year out. Next slide, please. And usually, especially if you grow the right stuff, more production means also more income. And it's also in that study found that important additional part of income of farmers came from the UPOV membership. Next slide, please. Another part, or another example of the importance of plant variety protection is Kenya. Kenya, which started ornamental industry, well, I think you know better than me, but I think about 30 years ago, from nothing. And nowadays, this ornamental industry is around $1 billion a year in production value. Next slide, please. And part of that was, of course, that they started to create an environment in which ornamental companies could do their work, and also create an environment in which modern varieties could be put on the market in Kenya. Well, all in all, and that, of course, that did not happen overnight, but all in all, nowadays we estimate that over 150,000 people work directly in Kenya in the flower industry, floriculture industry, and more than 500,000 indirectly. So that's an enormous boost for economic development of such a country as Kenya. Next slide, please. Another angle of another reason why new varieties are and plant variety protection is so important is an example that we found in Peru. Peru also became member around 2010, and then there was the possibility to bring new blueberry varieties on the market there by foreign breeders, and that gave Peru the possibility grow more and more blueberries, but also to export them to the rest of the world. And so you can see that the impact of plant variety protection, of new varieties, of new high value crops can have a relatively quick impact on the income and in a country. Next slide, please. Now, for growers, what are the perspectives for growers? Next slide, please. So growers, but also, let's say, we all as people, what do we want from new varieties? Well, there's, of course, a growing world population, so we need more yield. But we also see changing consumption patterns, like in the West, more plant-based proteins, but in the rest of the world, more proteins in general. Other consumer demands, we want different food, we want more sustainable food, but we also want to change our economies that are more bio-based instead of fossil fuel-based, so changing consumption patterns. What we also need from new varieties, from agriculture in general, is that it will adapt itself, or it needs to be adapted to dry conditions or to climate change, or to be able to grow with less inputs like energy or phosphates. And this slide is from a few years ago, but especially since the war in Ukraine, these elements of less inputs, less energy cost and less phosphates are becoming more and more important. Not only want we all these traits from new varieties, at the same time we have the Sustainable Development Goals that we agreed upon together in the United Nations. I'll come back to them a bit later. Next slide, please. So there was I think 2 years ago, there was a enquete with farmers done by the World Farmers Organization. What are their needs and their expectations of new improved plant varieties? Next slide, please. And the result was there. First of all, do you use new plant varieties? And 3/4 of them said, yes, we do use them. Next slide, please. And then the question was also, how important are they? And then more than half that the new plant varieties are very important for us. Next slide, please. And then the question, of course, why are they so important for you? And these are reasons farmers note, growers note, when they talk about what they need, what they need from plant varieties. First one is better yields, improved income, pest and diseases resistance, becoming more and more important when people are looking at plant protection products with a more skeptical mind. Drought tolerance, well, very important when you look at climate change. Reduced cost of inputs is always good for a commercial farmer. Higher value products, that's a very important trait, especially in the West. Access to new markets, of course, if you can enter new markets, that could be an economic advantage. Your export potential and new products. So farmers have big expectations of new plant varieties. Next slide, please. Especially when looking at climate change, more than half of the farmers say, well, that's very important that we have new plant varieties that help us to respond, to adapt to climate change. Next slide, please. And for sustainability, even more, farmers expect new plant varieties, whether it's agricultural varieties or ornamental varieties or horticultural varieties, to have better traits when they talk about sustainability of systems. Well, here it says food systems, but I think you can also say this for ornamental varieties. Of course, your ornamental growers also need varieties that are better adapted to the diseases, pests and diseases, the current pests and diseases, but also new and emerging pests and diseases because of climate change. Next slide, please. Now a little bit about how breeders view the world. Next slide, please. So there is this AIPH system with its statement that it wants to provide and promote an effective system of plant variety protection with the aim of encouraging development of new varieties of plants. Next slide, please. And maybe I should have started with this one, but it's also good to realize it here that plant breeding is not easy and it's not something you just do. It's expensive. Usually it will take many years from an initial crossing, an initial idea, before you have a variety that is good enough to put to the market. And that means it's a big investment in time, in knowledge and capital. And usually plant breeders invest, well, between 10 or 30% of their gross income annually on research and development. And that is a lot. That's much more than many industries in this world. So plant breeding is really a very high capital, high knowledge activity. Well, if there is not a good system to protect this investment, there would not be a plant breeder investing in it. So you need a good system to protect these investments. And like I just showed, farmers rely on new and improved plant varieties. And well, I think, of course, I'm a bit biased here, but I think that the AIPH-based plant breeders' rights system is the best system to protect these investments. Next slide, please. What kind of right do you get from plant breeders' right? Probably most of you will already know that, but the rights that you get is as an owner of as a developer of a variety, and you apply for your plant breeders' rights, you get a monopoly. You get all the rights for production or reproduction, conditioning for the purpose of propagation, offering for sale, selling or marketing, exporting and importing or stocking for your variety. Of course, when you sell the propagating material to your customer, so to you, to growers, of course, there's no reason for a breeder to say, but you're not allowed to do anything with it. Of course, in a license agreement, the breeder can give you all kinds of authorizations to do what you want to do with it. But usually a breeder will tell you, well, you're not allowed to propagate the variety and sell the variety unless there's a specific agreement on that. But that's, let's say, the rights that you get as a breeder, having gotten your plant variety, your plant breeder's right. Next slide, please. There are conditions and limitations, of course, on these rights. And one is a very important one. Sorry, Audrey, next slide, please. Of course, a plant breeder right, there are a few exceptions to these monopoly rights. So one is what we call the private and non-commercial purposes. A very small farmer or someone who has a small allotment, growing his own vegetables. Well, no plant breeder will go after such a person and say, well, you are using my variety without paying a license. So very small and non-commercial activities can be done with plant varieties without plant breeders having the right to ask for or to provide a license. Also is possible and allowed to use varieties for experimental purposes, to test them, to see whether they grow in a good environment, yes or no. But a very important one, it's also exception to that right, is that other breeders can use protected variety for further breeding. And I think that is very important, that you don't get a monopoly on certain traits, because other breeders can emulate or can use your genetic material for their own breeding program. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see in green all countries that are already member of UPOF and started recently to become a member. Next slide, please. And these are all countries in which we are discussing. I mean, the UPOF Secretariat are discussing and helping those countries to change their laws or to create a law, or at least are in discussion with the UPOF office to become member. Next slide, please. Next, please. And now, very quickly, a few current discussions, because I see we're running out of time. And these discussions, Mia Buma, she will take a few of these discussions with you later also. And we can discuss them also in the Q&A session. So next slide, please. So one of the current discussion is, and that's an important one, about essentially derived varieties. And in general, that is the big discussion is, when is it with something a new variety, and a new variety, then you could claim plant breeders' rights if it tested, and when is it an EDV? For instance, if you walk through an apple orchard and you find a mutant which has a slightly other color, well, traditionally we would say that's not something that was being bred, so for which a plant breeder has been active, but it's just a mutation you have found. We call that an essentially derived variety. You cannot claim exclusive rights to such a mutant, and we devised in the UPOF a system that's called essentially derived varieties. That means that if you find such a variety or such a mutant, you cannot market it yourself. Only you need to have an agreement with the original owner of that variety, of that apple in that orchard. But sorry, get back, Audrey. Thank you. But the thinking, so that note, how we deal with this situation was well created some 20 years ago and some 15 years ago, adapted. But now with the upcoming new breeding technologies, we don't think that thinking is not fit for purpose anymore, and it should be replaced by a new one. Well, Mia is going to discuss with you more about that, so I'll skip now that one. Next slide, please. Another thing Mia will also discuss with you is how to deal with harvested materials. Also here, there is an issue, but sometimes the seeds, the propagating materials are also end products. And then it will be difficult to say, well, what is this? What we have here is this propagating material on which there is a claim of the breeder that there are breeders' rights attached to it, or is it free to be marketed anywhere? Also, there is discussion about an explanatory note, how to deal with that situation, and AIPH, you are part of that working group, and Mia is going to discuss that with you as well. Next slide, please. I only need 1 more minute, Audrey. Just a few conclusions on what we recently had a seminar on plant breeding and plant variety protection, looking at agriculture and adaptations to climate change. And it was a very good attended seminar. And the conclusions we drew was, well, climate change is increasingly affecting everyone, everywhere in the world, with different effects, but everywhere farmers and breeders and consumers are facing challenges, difficulties, both on the biotic side, pests and diseases, but also abiotic, like heat, drought, rain, seasonal changes. And a range of strategies is needed to respond. to adapt agriculture to those challenges. But a very important part of those strategies will be plant breeding, because if you can change the genetics of plants in a good way, that's a very powerful way to deal with these changes. But like already said, plant breeding is a long-term process, and that requires a long-term investment, and that also requires from governments and from regions to understand this long-term process and this long-term investment, and there should be an enabling environment which promotes indeed the development of new varieties. And well, the UPOF system is there for the promotion of those, for the development of those varieties. Next slide. Last slide. Another important discussion globally at UPOF is what is the impact of new plant varieties on smallholder farmers? Many NGOs claim that plant variety protection is to the detriment of smallholder farmers because, and so they are fighting against UPOF membership in many of those countries that are not yet a member of UPOF. Well, I tend to disagree with these NGOs. I think the development of new varieties is also in the interest of smallholder farmers, but there is discussion and there is some unclarity on what the impact is. So we're working on that as well in UPOF to see if we can clarify this situation and give more guidance on the impact of smallholder farmers. And by doing that, we hope that more countries will see a possibility to become member of UPOF. In the end, that is for the benefit of society. So thank you very much. This was my presentation. I give the floor now back to Jack.
Thank you, Mr. Valstar. A lot of developments in the world of UPOF, and we will certainly come back to that during our panel discussion. If AIPH is the world's champion of plants, then our second speaker must be the world's champion on protecting the intellectual property of plant breeders. Being the secretary of CIOPORA since 2004, I think Dr. Krieger has more than earned this title. Before CIOPORA, Dr. Krieger has worked as a lawyer at an international law firm specializing in IP protection, particularly plant breeders' rights, and advising agricultural breeders on several hundreds of court cases up to the European Court of Justice. Dr. Krieger holds a law degree from the University of Bonn and a degree in business administration from the Aachen University of Applied Sciences. He's also completed his doctoral dissertation on the topic Farmers' Exemption in Germany at the Philipps University of Marburg. Dr. Krieger will speak on the obliged use of variety denomination in our industry. Because to support the effective working of the UPOF plant breeders' rights system, Dr. Krieger will make a serious request to the ornamental sector to mention variety names in the right manners on all products. With the current trend of new variety names constantly coming into commercial production, often quickly invented for marketing purposes, the impression often prevails that variety names can be used arbitrarily or not used at all. Dr. Krieger will clarify and argue the importance of correct and consistent use of variety names. Dr. Krieger, see you.
Thank you very much, Jack, for these very kind words. I'm very honored about it, and I will try to do my best to give a nice presentation on the topic. I try to share my screen with you. Let me check if it works. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to speak on the obliged use of variety denomination in the industry. I'm very pleased to share information about this topic with the audience, and I'm also happy to answer any questions afterwards. This is an important aspect because it is very useful for transparency and for sustainability also to know which product I buy in the retail or wherever, and so this use of variety denomination is important. One slide on CIOPORA. We are the international community of breeders of asexually reproduced horticultural varieties. We are as old as UPOV, founded in 1961. So, and the establishment of UPOV, in fact, was also the reason for the establishment of Ciupova, because at that time, the breeders of asexually reproduced ornamentals thought that they need a representation in front of this very important body. So Ciupova was found in the same year than UPOV. We are, as Jack already said, very specialized in IP protection for our crops. And in fact, our breeders and the breeders of asexually reproduced ornamentals and fruits hold more or less 2/3 of the world's PBR titles. Ciupova represents 150 members directly in 29 countries on all 5 continents. But together with our association members, we represent more or less 300 to 400 breeders worldwide, majority of them small and medium-sized breeding companies. We are observer in UPOV since the beginning, and we contribute significantly to the developments there. And Marien already mentioned some of the developments. I'm happy to contribute also to this discussion after the presentation. We will speak about the law because the use of variety denomination is part of the law. And as Jack said, I'm a lawyer by my studies. And so I like to read and analyze the law and share some information about it. And the 2 important provisions in the law which deal with variety denomination is Article 20 of the UPOV 1991 Act and Article 17 of the Community Plant Variety Rights Regulation. Let's start with Article 20. Each variety has a denomination, a variety denomination. This is obligatory. So there is no protected variety in the world without a denomination. All varieties have the same, so the variety denomination is the same for a variety in all contracting parties of UPOV. So in all countries, one variety has the same variety denomination. There are some very small exceptions. If in the country the variety denomination proposed by the breeder is doesn't fit or is against existing law, then exceptionally a variety can have a different name. But in the vast majority of cases, one variety has the same denomination all over the world. And this denomination has to be used from everybody who is offering for sale or market propagating material. So the term propagating material is important here. Everybody who sells, offers for sale, whatever, propagating material of a protected variety has to use the variety denomination. Article 17 of the Community Plant Variety Rights Regulation is a little bit different. In paragraph 1, it says, like UPOV, any person who offers or disposes of to others, like selling for commercial purposes, a variety constituent, must use the variety denomination. So here you see there's no mentioning of the word propagating material, but the CPVR regulation uses the word variety constituents. I will let you know what I think, what is a variety constituent in a minute. In the second paragraph, it says any person effecting such acts like selling material in respect of any other material of the variety, so other material than variety constituents, must inform of that denomination if a request is made by an authority, by the purchaser, or by any other person having a legitimate interest. And even after the right has been terminated or expired, then the denomination has to be used or has to informed about. What is this? On the first glance, it looks like a cut rose. When we speak about law, we think what is it in terms of the Community Plant Variety Rights Regulation? And Article 5 of this regulation says the following: a plant grouping consists of entire plants or parts of plants as far as such parts are capable of producing entire plants both referred to hereinafter as variety constituents. You are more experts than me in growing roses or in growing flowers and plants, but I know that if you cut this rose in 10 pieces and there are some meristematic cells into these pieces, and you put them in the soil and put some ingredients to it, then there will be roots. And this cut rose is able of producing entire rose plants through to type. So in my opinion, and in Siuporva's opinion, this cut rose is a variety constituent. What does that mean? I showed you before the CPVR regulation, Article 1 or Paragraph 1 of Article 17. Everybody who sells variety constituents must use the variety denomination. So everyone, that means the flower shop. Flower shops who sell cut roses must use the variety denomination. So that's my first conclusion. Some people still say it's not a variety constituents. The other term is harvest material. So a cut rose is harvest material. I don't agree, and Siuporva doesn't agree. But let's think for a while that the cut rose is harvest material, so no variety constituent. What happens then? Any person offering for sale or selling any other material of a protected variety must inform of the denomination if a request is made by an authority or by the purchaser or by any other person having a legitimate interest. What happens if you don't do this? If you don't use the variety denomination or you don't inform, that has serious consequences. Namely, in Article 94 of the regulation, it speaks about infringement. It says, whoever omits the correct usage of a variety denomination, as referred to in Article 17.1, or omits the relevant information as referred to in Article 17.2, may be sued by the holder to enjoin such infringement or to pay reasonable compensation or both. So if you don't comply with these rules, you infringe the plant breeder's rights of this protected variety. That means in the EU, each seller of protected varieties of flowers and fruits must, on request, inform about the variety denomination, at least inform when somebody asks for it. If we, as Siuporva is doing, and as I'm convinced that is the right interpretation, most of the flowers are variety constituents, everybody who sells this material has to use the denomination. That means in writing, put it on a sign somewhere when in the shop, touched to the flowers. And what we often see, there are often names in the retail and in the supermarkets. There are often names attached to the flowers and to the plants. But don't confuse the variety denomination with the trade name or the trademark. And I have shown here some on my screen. Red Naomi is a very famous one, Black Baccarat, Pink Kisses, Pink Lady, the apple, Kansin apple, Envy an apple. These are not the variety denominations. These are the trade names or trademarks. The variety denominations are different. You see them in brackets here. And Article 17.2 of the CPVR regulation is crystal clear about this obligation. If somebody asks for it, you have to name the variety denomination and not only the trade name or the trademark. When I buy flowers in a shop in the last 24 months, I always ask, please, can you tell me the variety denomination of this variety or this and this variety? And now guess how many correct answers I got in the 24 months since when I do it? 0. Nobody could tell me a variety denomination. And it was no surprise because the salesmen, the owners of the flower shops, they didn't know it. And I have one of my flower shops where I usually buy the flowers, and they still sell to me the flowers, although I ask stupid questions sometimes. I ask him, can you show me the website of your wholesaler, or show me the invoice, or show me the delivery paper or document? He brought it to me. no mention of the variety denomination. On the website of the wholesaler, no mention of the variety denomination. So this denomination just doesn't exist, obviously. And it exists, but it doesn't get through the retail store. This is an infringement. And I told the owner of the shop, now you're infringing the plant breeder's right. So he was not amused. I said, okay, don't worry, we don't go against you. But it's a little bit surprising and a little bit concerning that, and I would guess the entire industry, the entire flower sellers in Europe would infringe plant breeders' rights of protected varieties in this aspect. What will the people say who are not in favor of the use? It's not feasible, it's too elaborate, no added value for customers. Information is not available, get lost in the supply chain. Yeah, that might be right at the moment. It's not feasible. I don't believe that. It's too elaborate. That's a question how you organize it. No added value for customers. I wouldn't agree to this, because if I have a positive buying experience as a customer, I want to have the same product again. If there's the vase life exceptionally longer than in the average vase life of a flower, for example, I would be very interested to have exactly this variety again. And so for transparent reasons and also for information reasons, the variety denomination is important. Information is not available. I think it is available because it starts at the very beginning with the breeder, and the breeders, of course, they have the variety denomination. And you see it works also in other crops. It works in fruits. You see here in the middle, the red sensation sweet selection of table grapes. The variety denomination is Ara. You see on the right side, Pink Lady, the variety denomination is Crips Pink. You see Jazz, it's Cy Fresh. So in other areas like fruits, it works, and it is possible. It's just a matter of organization. How can we achieve this? Breeders need to promote their varieties with the variety denomination in their catalogs, and when they license the varieties to their customers. The propagators must use the variety denomination when selling cuttings and young plants. Without any doubt, they have to do it. The growers normally are required by contract to use the variety denomination in the greenhouses, on the benches and in the blocks where they grow the variety, also for as a matter of controlling. Export-import, flowers should come in boxes with the variety denomination. At least the variety denomination should be mentioned in the shipping documents, and I think it is mentioned to a vast extent already in the documents, but it doesn't get through to the retail. And the retail must use the variety denomination, or at least inform about it if somebody asks for it, like the breeder, like an authority, like me as a customer. At the moment, it doesn't happen, and this is a bit concerning. Sciopora has a very clear position on this. In order to provide for clarity and transparency in the business and towards the consumers, the mandatory use of the variety denomination for each and any material of the variety is necessary. So not only for variety constituents or propagating material, but also for harvest material, like the fruits which I showed. This is harvest material because you cannot grow from an apple tree true to type, but from a cut rose, from a carnation, from a jabbera, or from a ranunculus. I have a ranunculus just in front of me on the table. You can grow plants true to type, so you have to use the variety denomination. At least you have to inform if you are selling to somebody for commercial purposes. And by having said this, I thank you for your attention, and I'm very happy to answer questions if they come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krieger, for this call to action to use variety denomination in our industry. It's a topic that has been on the SPG's agenda from day one. So now we have the panel discussion. If you want, you can put your questions in the Q&A section from this meeting. But I would like to kick off this discussion with a question for Mr. Valstar. Mr. Valstar, thank you for the insights in increasing production and employment, like in Vietnam and Kenya, and quality of the propagated material due to the UPOF system. Nevertheless, there are voices and parties who prefer the patent system. Against the background of using GMOs and the new genetic techniques, doesn't UPOF worry that the patent rights system will overtake the plant breeders' rights system in the future? And if so, what could UPOF do to avoid this?
Well, thank you, Jack. I don't know how much time I get to answer this question because
limited.
Because this is a deep and wide-ranging issue, and we had big discussions on this topic some 10 years ago, when there was also a big discussion on isn't patents on plants taking over plant variety protection through plant breeders' rights. And for all those that are listening, the big difference is when a variety is protected by plant breeders' rights, other breeders can still, let's say, have access to the genetics of that variety, that important trait, through this breeders' exemption. So they are allowed to work with the new variety to create newer varieties. But with patents, that's not the case. With patents, you have a locked system, and those that have the patent, they are not obliged to give you access to that genetics. So they can say, sorry, nice that you want also. So for instance, I've created a pink tomato, which is a big success in the market, and I patent that. Then other growers of tomato, other breeders of tomato cannot use your pink variety to breed new pink varieties. No, you as a patent holder can say, no, you're not allowed to use my variety. So the patent system is blocking innovation in that way, and the UPOF system is still promoting innovation. So that's the big discussion that we had then. At that moment in Europe, because it was wider than only the EU, we have been able to change the patent regulations, that it's not possible to patent what we call essentially biological processes. And the reason was to make sure that biological materials, genetics, are available for further breeding for everyone. How to do that? So it was not so much, let's say, making UPOF more attractive, but making sure that in patenting you cannot just patent anything. So that's.
So you want to keep stimulating innovation and further development of the products.
Yeah, well, in our view, of course, a patent system is very strong, but too strong for plants and plant breeding, because you all need access to, well, more or less similar and the same genetics. And if you give patents for genetical development of traits, of important traits, then you give too much power to those that have developed them. That was our view, and that was shared by, well, all of Europe.
Clear. Thank you very much. There's a question in the Q&A. Dr. Krieger, I think that could be for you. A very practical question from Peter Prince. What can we do to get our Floricultura Phalaenopsis variety names into the shops? Any suggestions are welcome.
The easiest one is you go to a shop and ask for the variety denomination of one of your varieties. If the shop owner cannot give you the variety denomination, you bring this up to the European Court of Justice. You will win this case, and from this moment on, the industry will change. That is the easiest way.
Yeah, it's a fairly long way, I think. But any practical suggestions of what, for example, growers or traders in our industry could do to actually get the names in the flower shop?
Yeah, practical. You know, let's speak about roses, for example. They come from Kenya, and they are in boxes. And on the boxes, easily you could put the variety denomination on it. And I know are these unwrappers. They take the roses out of the boxes and they give it new wraps and new papers around it, and without the denomination. And maybe that could stop at the beginning. And then in the delivery papers, in the invoices, the denomination should be mentioned. And every grower knows which varieties he grows. So the denomination is clear to every grower and every producer of the flowers. So when he brings the flowers into the boxes, he can put the stickers on it, and there's a lot of information available already. And I'm pretty sure that the variety denomination is also part of this information which is on the stickers in the boxes. If not, it can be easily put into it with with the softwares which we have. And then it goes to the wholesalers. It goes to the auction. It wouldn't be deleted at one step, and then it would go to the retail. And the retail, you know, they can print stickers and put them on the signs which are attached to the flowers or in the vases. So it is possible, and it is possible in many other areas. And if you buy kiwis, on each and every kiwi you find small stickers, and a kiwi you buy for 30 cents, a cut rose you buy for 2-3 euros sometimes. So the value of this product is higher than in other crops, and still each and every apple and the kiwi and other crops have these small stickers. I don't like the stickers because you have to unwrap them again, but it is possible. So I don't step on the opinion that it is not feasible.
Okay, thank you for that. Another question, I think, also for you, returning on the variety constituents. Do you only consider materials to be variety constituents when they can be used for to propagate true to type, or are there more criteria on that?
No, it should be true to type. You know, if you have an apple and you have the seeds of an apple and put them in the soil and have a lot of time available, then you will have an apple tree, but not true to type. So you will have whatever variety, but not the one which the apple was about. In cut roses and in many other crops and parts of plants with meristematic cells, you can do it true to type. And I think this is the precondition, true to type. It's not in the law, but I think we have to add this in our mind that this material must be able to produce a plant true to type. Otherwise it's not propagating material in the real sense. That would go too far. Okay, thank you. Marien, a question for you. You shared information and outcomes of the UPOV seminar on the role of plant breeding and plant variety protection in enabling agriculture and horticulture to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. Do you, as a policymaker, have visions on how specifically the ornamental sector could actually contribute to mitigate and adapt to climate change? And how do the ornamental growers benefit from the novelty protection to contribute to the climate challenges?
Also, okay, thank you, Jack. Again, a wide-ranging question. I think in general, whether you're in agriculture or in horticulture or in ornamentals, climate change will affect your way of working. But of course, in horticulture, in protected agriculture, in glass houses or under other kinds of protection, and I think lots of ornamentals growing is of course under protected environments, the effects of climate change are not so wide-ranging as in outside in field production, because you can control a lot of the climate itself. But still, then I think there is still this possibility that climate change will bring new pests and diseases, and that is not easy, and also combined with the view that we want to use less pesticides. There's big pressure on pesticides, especially in Europe, that we want to get rid of certain pesticides, etc. So let's say the development of the upcoming of new pests and diseases is a big issue. And there, I think you need to, let's say, work together with breeders, with those that do breeding of your varieties, sit with them and talk to them, or at least have a common view on what are important traits for us as growers, and are you breeders working on them? Or on the other hand, breeders should, any normal breeder will do that. He will ask his customers what is important for them. So in this cooperation between breeders and growers, I think is the best solution to adapt to climate change. And for ornamentals, we can be optimistic because the pressures will not be as big as for field growers. But still, it's an item to consider.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we will go to the last question for this panel discussion. A question in the Q&A section from Michel Ricalde. In ornamentals, when variety already has a trademark, I have seen that they are rarely known by the varietal denomination. Is there any way to penalize this, or how could we promote it? Dr. Krieger, I think this is for you.
That is, I think a variety can be promoted and sold with a trademark, but it has to be also named with a variety denomination. So then you have two names on the sign or on the sticker. I think there's no opposition between these two things. Not using the variety denomination is an infringement, so that should be enough to convince everybody who is selling these products to put it on, to use it, or to at least to know it. I think there's no way that the entire retail doesn't know a variety denomination. I think it's really concerning. And as I said, I tested it since 2 years now, and I went into several flower shops, and nobody could even tell me the variety denomination. Most of the owners, they didn't even know what the denomination is. They showed me the trade name or the trademark, and said, "Yeah, here it is. You see it here." I said, "No, this is the trade name. This is not the denomination." So maybe that's also a question of information and education of the sector, and we are very happy to take our part and our responsibility in this. And also, I would say we have AIPH, we have Union Fleurs, we have the Association of the Flower Retail, we have the breeders. We could sit together and find a solution for this. I think that may be a very practical way forward.
I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you for that. And I think that this concludes the panel discussion on novelty protection. There are some questions in the Q&A. I propose that we try to answer them in typing, so that at least everything gets answered. We've spoken about the challenges within UPOF, especially with regards to the ecological, social, and technical developments, and the importance of using the correct variety denomination in our industry. If it's not clear which products are being traded, how can plant breeders' right can be enforced correctly? On behalf of AIPH, I would like to thank everybody for attending and participating in discussion. A special thanks to our two speakers, Mr. Marien Valstar and Dr. Edgar Krieger. As chair of Royal Flora Holland, I would have liked to thank you with a fabulous bouquet from our growers with the correct denomination, obviously, but that will have to wait until our next physical meeting. And before I give the floor back to Audrey, I would like to thank Audrey, Rachel, and Mia for preparing and realizing this webinar, because it's always a lot of work, and thank you for all the work you've done in this field. Back to you, Audrey.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jack. And thanks again to the two speakers. It's a really fascinating subject, quite complex, and so very important to have experts to give us the latest news and interpretations.
Okay. Thank you, and good luck with the remainder of the program.
Thank you very much, Marien.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks.